天の川火事のね聞こゆ彦星と七夕爪と今宵や浦しも
On the night of Tanabata, I hear the sound of paddles being rowed from the Milky Way. So Hikobashi is going to see Orihime tonight. Beautiful summer night sky, full of stardust, and the Milky Way as if flowing through the sky. There are two stars that shine brightly across the Milky Way. They are Orihimeboshi and Hikobashi. These two stars, who are only allowed to see each other once a year, have this story to tell. Once upon a time, 8 celestial nymphs descended to Earth. They were given the mission to impart special skills and knowledge to people. One day, an elderly couple went to fetch pure water for sake brewing. An elderly couple is guided by a mysterious light and discovers a hidden spring deep in the forest. The celestial nymphs were bathing in a pure spring deep in the mountains. The surface of the spring shimmered in the reflection of the light, and the two of them gasped at its beauty. But more than its beauty, what caught their eye was the beautiful robe they had never seen hanging on a pine tree by the spring. The old woman realized that it belonged to the celestial nymph, so she quietly stole one and tried to take it home. At that time, the celestial nymphs, noticing the old couple, hurriedly came out of the spring and began to look for feather robes. 7 celestial nymphs put on feather robes and flew to heaven, but one celestial nymph could not find the feather robe. Looking at the old couple, the celestial nymph asked suspiciously,
"Don't you know my feather robe? Please return it if you have it."
The elderly couple look at each other and answer with a laugh.
This cloth is yours? Is there any evidence?
Oh my gosh! We were lucky to find such a beautiful piece of cloth.
Yes, from now on, we too can live a rich life.
The celestial nymph begs.
Please, please. I can't go back to the heavens without this feather robe.
I can't give you back such a wonderful robe for free.
That's right, we have lives too. This robe is ours.
If you really want this, just work hard.
The celestial nymph had no choice but to follow them to their house. They then kept her in their home under the pretext of adopting her as their adopted daughter. They made a living from brewing sake. They decided to have her make a special sake.
Hey, celestial nymph. Make a kuchikami sake for us.
That's good. The sake brewed by the celestial nymph seems to have a special effect.
The celestial nymph chewed and spat out rice and wheat, chewed and spat it out, and made a kuchikami sake. The sake was indeed special, and it quickly gained a reputation as a cure for all diseases. The elderly couple sold sake at a high price and eventually amassed a great fortune. However, as the elderly couple gained wealth, they gradually became greedy and decided to drive out the celestial nymph.
Your job is over.
We decided to leave here and live happily for the rest of our lives in the capital.
So you're going to give me back my robe?
Oh, I've sold that long ago. Now you're free. And from now on, you can do whatever you want.
She returned to the spring of beginnings and looked up at the sky.
天の原降り裂け見れば霞たち 家路惑いて行方知らずも
If you look up at the heavenly field, it is hazy, and you don't know where to go on that cloud path. Unable to return to heaven, the celestial nymph, who was at a loss, wept by the spring. At that time, a young man who was visiting the spring to cleanse the cow found her.
Why are you crying here?
Actually, I was a celestial nymph, but I was robbed of my robe and imprisoned on this earth. I was adopted and raised by an elderly couple, but after increasing their wealth, I was kicked out. I've lost my robe and I have nowhere to go.
That must be very painful. Where is your robe now?
The celestial nymph shook her head sadly.
An old couple sold it off, and I don't know where it is now. Without feather robe, I would not be able to return to heaven. I'm stranded here, and I don't know what to do.
The youth thought silently for a while. He was moved by her beauty and the depth of her sadness, and wanted to help her somehow.
If you don't mind, why don't you come to my house? We have a big field, and me and this cow live together. It's okay, don't worry, we'll get through it.
The celestial nymph was surprised by these words, and was filled with gratitude.
You're a really kind-hearted person, but my presence may bother you.
The youth looked firmly into her eyes and spoke.
Who can live without being bothered? If you think you've caused trouble, you can repay the favor with something else. If you need help, I want to help.
Tears spilled from the eyes of the celestial nymph again, but this time they were tears of gratitude.
Thank you. How much it helps to have someone like you. Thanks so much.
Everyone calls me Ashihiko. What's your name?
My name is Tanabata-sama. In other words, it is called a Hagoromo woman.
Tanabata-sama? That's a little hard to say. Can I call you Ori?
Yes, it sounds very nice.
Ashihiko smiled kindly and took Ori's hand and pulled her to her feet.
Now, let's go home. A new life awaits.
They held hands and began to walk together along the path dyed in the setting sun. Each step was the beginning of a new hope and love. When she arrived at Ashihiko's house, Ori swore in her heart. For him, I want to live here to the fullest. When Ori regained her composure when she started living in Ashihiko's house, she remembered her mission. It was to impart the wisdom and skill of weaving to the people of the earth. One day, together with Ashihiko, Ori made an offer to the village head.
I was born a celestial nymph, but now I live on earth like you all. I would like to pass on the weaving skills I learned in the heavenly realm to you, and help enrich the whole village. The village head looked at Ori curiously.
That's great. Ori, please share this technique with everyone.
Ori first established a workshop in the village. In one corner of the square, a large hut made of wood and straw was erected, in which looms and spinning wheels were arranged. The villagers gathered with great curiosity and were ready to receive instruction in weaving.
Let's start with the hemp stalk.
They harvested the fields and spread out the hemp stalks that had hitherto been thrown away.
Dry the hemp stalks and tear them into small pieces to remove the fibers. And we use these fibers to spin yarns.
The villagers followed the ori and began the work of drying the hemp stalks and extracting the fibers. Ori carefully watched the process and guided by example. The villagers cried out in admiration as she deftly tore the fibers. Ori then taught the technique of spinning yarn. The villagers went to the spinning wheel and carefully spun the yarn, following her example.
It's important to spin the yarn evenly. Don't rush it and pull it out slowly.
Ori gently instructed. Once the yarn was sufficient, the next step was to apply the yarn to the loom.
Come on, let's learn the procedure of weaving cloth together today.
First, Ori started explaining how to tension the warp threads.
First of all, it is important to stretch the warp well. This will be the basis for weaving, so be careful.
Ori deftly began setting the long thread into the loom. The women of the village watched with wide eyes.
If you don't stretch the warp well, the cloth will wrinkle, so be careful.
As she said this, she carefully finished strung the threads one by one. Next, the weaving showed the work of threading the weft. The weaving hands move as if by magic, weaving the weft between the warps.
In this way, we will pass the weft between the warps. If you do it in a certain rhythm, you will get a beautiful cloth.
The women of the village decided to try it themselves. Although their movements were awkward at first, they gradually got the hang of it under Ori's guidance. Ori then taught them how to cultivate silkworms.
In order to make silk, you need to grow silkworms. Let's plant mulberry trees and feed mulberry leaves to silkworms to grow them.
Ori planted a mulberry tree with the villagers and began to care for the silkworms. When silkworms began to make cocoons, Ori showed how to use the cocoons to spin yarn.
Boil this cocoon, take out a thin thread, and weave silk with this thread.
Although the villagers were surprised by the delicate work, they steadily acquired the skills under her guidance. Under her guidance, the villagers gradually began to weave beautiful cloth from hemp and silk. The women of the village began to earn income by making beautiful fabrics with their own hands, tailoring clothes for their families and selling surpluses. The village flourished in weaving, and Ashihiko and Ori also deepened their love for each other. Time to work together in the workshop at dusk, time to share meals, and time to talk while looking up at the stars in the night sky. Their bond was strengthened, and they were congratulated by the people of the village. One night, under the stars, Ori said quietly,
Ashihiko, I am truly grateful to have met you. Without you, I could not live happily on this earth.
Ashihiko gently squeezed Ori's hand back.
Ori, I am the happiest thing for you to be here. And let's continue to walk together.
They looked at each other and made a firm promise. The years passed, and 2 children were born to them. Ori continued to teach the villagers the techniques, Ashihiko worked hard in the fields, and the children grew up healthy. The clothes in the village were finished with the highest quality, and the day came to sell them to the capital. In the village square, colorful clothes were piled up and loaded onto Ashihiko's ox carts. Ashihiko was to accompany him on the journey, and he was preparing to head to the capital with the expectations of the village on his shoulders.
Ashihiko, I asked for it.
Ashihiko smiled and nodded, called out to everyone, and left.
Come on, everyone, let's go to the capital.
When we arrived in the capital, we found a bustling market. When Ashihiko and the others spread the clothes, they sold one after another. The people of the city admired the beauty of the village's clothes and bought them at high prices. Ashihiko was walking through the market to take a breather when something suddenly caught his eye. It was a beautiful feather robe displayed in front of the storefront of a dry goods store. Ashihiko approached the store, as if drawn by the brilliance of the feather robe.
This is...
Ashihiko muttered and reached for the feather robe.
What a beautiful cloth, like a heavenly fabric.
The shopkeeper noticed Ashihiko's condition and spoke to him with a smile.
Customer, are you interested in that feather robe?
Ashihiko asked, nodding.
Where on earth did this come from? I've never seen anything so beautiful.
The shopkeeper replied, gently stroking the feather robe.
This robe is something special. In fact, it is said that this is the feather robe of the celestial nymph. It's very rare, and that's why it's so expensive.
Ashihiko's heart began to stir in an instant.
The celestial nymph's feather robe. No way, it could be Ori's feather robe.
The shopkeeper continued talking.
Legend has it that a celestial nymph came down from heaven wearing this robe. But for some reason, she was forced to stay on the ground. So she gave up her feather robe. It is also said that whoever obtains this feather robe will receive the power and blessings of heaven.
Ashihiko deepened his conviction in his heart.
This is definitely Ori's feather robe. And I have to get it back at all costs.
Ashihiko took a deep breath and asked the shopkeeper.
I want to buy this feather robe. How much money do I need?
The shopkeeper offered a hefty price and smiled.
Because it's so valuable.
Ashihiko's heart was shaken.
There is no way I can afford such a large amount of money right now. But I absolutely need it for her.
Ashihiko decided to return to the village and consult with the villagers.
Please wait. I'll definitely come back to buy this feather robe.
After telling the shopkeeper, Ashihiko and the others hurried to the village.
Welcome back. What's wrong with you in such a hurry?
Never mind. Ori, please wait at home.
When Ashihiko returned to the village, he immediately gathered the villagers. In the square, there were faces of villagers with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation.
Everyone, I found something in the capital. I found a feather robe. But it was very expensive.
The villagers raised their voices in amazement and excitement.
Then we have to buy it back somehow.
So, I would like to consult with you all.
As if to interrupt Ashihiko, the village chief stood up and spoke.
Guys, Ori has brought us abundance. Now it's our turn to help Ori. If we all work together, little by little, we can definitely do something.
The villagers began to move in unison. Little by little, money and valuables were brought in from the houses, and the whole village came together to raise funds to recover the feather robe.
This is my entire fortune. With gratitude to Ori.
If we can help even a little.
The villagers were generous in their cooperation. Ashihiko and the others hurried to the capital again, filled with anticipation and anxiety. Taking the money they had collected, they headed to the market, met the shopkeeper again, and presented them with the money they had collected.
This is all we have. Please give me this feather robe.
The shopkeeper counted the money with a surprised expression, and then nodded.
Okay. I'll sell you this feather robe.
Ashihiko and the others, who had safely bought back the woven feather robe in the capital, proudly returned to their village. On the way, he held the feather robe in his arms and smiled as he imagined Ori's reaction when she saw the robe in the village. Back in the village, Ashihiko showed the villagers the feather robe, and everyone took their breath away at its beauty.
Now, let's express our gratitude to Ori.
The village head called out, and the whole village began to prepare for the festival. The villagers did their part, and the children were running around with smiles on their faces. Men and women of all ages joined forces to prepare for the special day. Colorful decorations were placed throughout the village, and on the eve of the festival, the village square was full of activity. Finally, the day of the festival arrived. The villagers dressed up beautifully and gathered in the square. A special place was prepared on the stage, and in the center of it was a seat for Ori to sit. Ori didn't know anything and was smiling in the atmosphere of the festival. Ashihiko was nervous, but he was looking forward to the moment. When the village head announced the start of the festival, the villagers cheered and began celebratory dances and songs. As the festival drew to a close, Ashihiko took the stage and slowly walked towards her. Ori was also happily watching, but gradually realized that their eyes were on herself at the center of it. In Ashihiko's hand was a beautifully wrapped feather robe. The villagers watched quietly, and the tension in the scene increased even more.
Ori, we have a special gift for you from all of us in the village.
When I opened the package, the feather robe that appeared from it shone even more beautifully in the moonlight. Ori's eyes widened, and tears of surprise and emotion rolled down her cheeks.
This is my feather robe.
This feather robe is a symbol of gratitude and love from all of us. We also wanted to give back to you the richness and happiness that you gave us.
Ori was so moved that she couldn't stop crying.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for your love and support.
You haven't been home for a while, have you? Why don't you go back to the heavenly realm once?
But Ori shook her head.
In fact, time passes at different speeds in heaven and on the earth. When I return to the heavenly realm, I will never see you again. So I want to stay in this village for a while and spend time with you.
Ori, who had regained her feather robe, was grateful to be able to return to heaven, but she loved her life on earth with all her heart. The days she spent with Ashihiko, her children, and the people of the village became her true happiness. As the years passed, the village became more and more prosperous, and Ori and Ashihiko lived happy days. However, a clan in a distant land heard rumors about the celestial nymph. He learned that a beautiful celestial nymph was on Earth, and he came to the village with his men to obtain her power. That night, the village was illuminated by a quiet moonlight. Ori and Ashihiko were spending a peaceful time at home with their children. But that peace was suddenly broken. The sound of footsteps and angry shouts echoing from the entrance of the village spread throughout the village.
Someone is attacking the village.
Ashihiko jumped out of the house to check the situation in the village. The clan soldiers were approaching.
Give me the celestial nymph.
Ori sensed the situation and held back tears to protect her family.
I have to go. To protect everyone.
Ashihiko desperately squeezed Ori's hand.
I won't let you do that. I'll protect you at all costs.
However, Ori shook her head silently.
Ashihiko, my beloved. Our love and bond are eternal. But right now, my priority is to protect this village and my family.
As the stars in the night sky watched, Ori wore a feather robe with tears in her eyes, with her determination to return to heaven in her heart.
Please, our children. And we will see each other again in the heavenly realm.
As the villagers watched, Ashihiko clasped Ori's hand and his heart was filled with the thought that he did not want to leave. Ashihiko cried out at the sudden parting, unable to hold back his tears.
Ori, I love you. I'll definitely go see you.
The villagers watched with tears in their eyes.
Ori, please be safe.
Ori smiled kindly at Ashihiko at the end.
I'm sure I'll be waiting for you in heaven.
Ori spread her feather robe and ascended to the sky. It was illuminated by the moonlight, and it was a beautiful but sad sight.
天の川霧立ち上る七夕の雲の衣のカエル袖かも
It looks like fog is rising in the Milky Way. Is it the fluttering sleeve of a robe like a cloud of weaving? The light of the Milky Way enveloped Ori's figure, and she gradually disappeared from sight. However, the light lingered long in the sky above the village, as if the stars were celebrating her return. When Ori ascended to heaven, the village regained its tranquility. The clan lost sight of the celestial nymph and retreated with regret. After Ori returned to heaven, Ashihiko continued to follow her teachings in the village and spent happy days with her children. However, he always had feelings for Ori in his heart and dreamed of the day of their reunion. Years passed and Ashihiko grew old. One night, Ashihiko met his peaceful end, surrounded by his family.
Ori, I'll see you soon.
His consciousness gradually drifted away, and eventually he departed for heaven. When Ashihiko opened his eyes, there was a beautiful heavenly world. And in front of him stood Ori. She was smiling with tears in her eyes.
Ashihiko, I've been waiting for you.
Really, I was able to see you again.
The two hugged each other in joy at their reunion.
Yes, God helped me.
Immediately after that, the gods of heaven appeared. The gods of heaven rejoiced at their reunion, but also shared sad news.
Ashihiko, Ori. The power of your love is amazing. But the time in heaven and on earth are different, and your constant presence will disturb the balance of the heavenly realm.
Their hearts were filled with surprise and sadness.
What do you mean?
You are only allowed to be together once a year.
The reason for this was the presence of the Milky Way. The Milky Way marks the boundary between the heavens and the earth, and its flow was important for maintaining the balance of the heavens. If they were always together, the balance would be upset, and chaos would arise in heaven and earth.
Still, if we can see each other even once a year,
Ori said as she wiped away her tears.
Our love is eternal, and we will surely look forward to that day.
In this way, Ashihiko and Ori ended up living apart across the Milky Way. As the day of Tanabata approaches, their hearts are filled with joy and anticipation. The moment they crossed the Milky Way and reunited under the starry sky on July 7th was the most special time of all for the two of them. On the ground, the love story of Ashihiko, who became Hikobashi, and Ori, who became Orihimaboshi, was told. Every year on July 7th, the villagers held a festival to celebrate the reunion of the two stars who had become stars. As the villagers gazed up at the stars shining in the night sky, they remembered the love story of Ori and Ashihiko and offered prayers to them.
霞立つ天の河原に君待つと行き帰るに戻すそ濡れぬ
I went back and forth to the Milky Way where the mist was gathering, and when I was waiting for you, the hem of my costume got wet.
Ori, it's nice to see you again.
Ashihiko, how long have I been waiting for this moment to see you?
The stars shining in the night sky continued to blink gently, as if listening to their thoughts.
Thank you for watching. Please like video if you liked it and subscribe.